Joining me today is New Hampshire State Senator Dan Feltes. Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So it's your end of the second year of your first biennium.
Right.
And I just thought I want to sort of benchmark our whole conversation around this today. At the end, I'll be reflections, but at the beginning, I want to focus on some of the bills, at least in this year,
Sure.
that you really think were significant accomplishments, things that you sponsored.
Well,
or worked with.
Working with Democrats and Republicans, we've made some progress on some very important issues, including the heroin and opioid public health crisis. First and foremost, folks were able to work together with good leadership from Senator Jeb Bradley and others to pass and reauthorize Medicaid expansion, helping upwards of 50,000 granted staters with health insurance, reducing uncompensated care in the system, which is a hidden tax on everyone, and helping thousands of people access treatment for substance use disorder services. So that was the biggest accomplishment, the biggest goal of the session. There are other bills that we did with respect to this crisis.
Can we just talk about the Medicaid expansion for a second? So was that close in the House at the end?
There was an amendment, a key amendment that needed to be passed, that passed by one vote, and Speaker Jasper, to his credit, doesn't have to vote, but he broke the tie and voted for it. So it actually was, for all intents and purposes, the critical amendment that made the bill pass and made the bill reasonable, passed by one vote. So yes, it was very close.
It was very close. What was the amendment?
Well, that amendment dealt with some prior amendments that were added, and also dealt with some of the stuff with respect to CMS and approvals by CMS. So
CMS is
Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services that authorizes the payment of the federal money under certain circumstances. So if your program's set up to potentially be in violation of those rules, you may not get the federal money. You can apply for waivers under certain circumstances. So the amendment dealt with a number of those issues. So it's been reauthorized. It will be revisited in the next biennium.
So this is will be ongoing. It's last biennium, this biennium, and next biennium. Do you think we'll get it settled at some point ever, or is it just going to be every 2 years?
That's a great question. I hope so. I think it would be good for the healthcare market if it was settled. And it would be good for health insurance carriers. It'd be good for our providers of, from mental health to substance use disorder services to have a level of certainty.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would think from a business perspective, certainty, clarity of a 4-year horizon has got to allow them to plan.
Yep.
And the uncertainty from a business perspective alone has got to be tough.
Absolutely. And then there's those who, there's people who argue for certainty with respect to business, health insurance, providers, jobs perspective. And then there's those who have argued that, let's revisit it every year or two because we want to revisit what the federal government's doing in terms of its share. So there are folks that make arguments on either side, but the upshot is this will be another debate coming up. So in the next election, when you're out there talking to folks, ask them what their position is, because this is critical for our economy and for the health care of 50,000 granted staters.
And this is part of a bigger or set of bills dealing with the opioid opioid crisis as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
We had about 45 seconds. Let's start that, and we'll finish it in the next segment.
Sure. So, one bill this year was to add additional money to treatment, prevention, and recovery. There were 2 bills that were merged together. One bill that I filed to provide $2 million for supportive housing, affordable and supportive housing for folks in recovery. So the question is, when you come out of treatment,
Then
where do you
what?
go? And if you have a supportive family and you have a place to go and you can afford a home and you have intensive caseworkers and that sort of thing, well, then maybe you're fine. But if you don't have a place to go, you
It's
end
easy
up
to relapse.
Yeah,
Right.
You end up it ends up costing more in the long run. So providing.
I got to get a time out here because speaking of costing, we got to go to a commercial break. But when we return, we're going to continue our conversation about the opioid crisis and what we're doing to deal with it. So please stay with us.